Hi, I'm Kirsten Pankey. I've chosen to do my presentation over the Hopi tribe and the environmental threats and subsequent health effects. So when I started my research, I found that doing environmental research over the Hopi reservation is almost impossible to discuss without including the Navajo reservation, considering the geographical location of the Hopi reservation within the Navajo reservation. So I guess on a broader sense, my focus is on the northeastern Arizona region of the native reservations. And through my research, I found the reoccurring topic of environmental threats was uranium mining. So I have also chosen to focus my presentation on uranium mining. So a little background about uranium mining in the northeast Arizona region. It began around the 1940s, and the purpose of the mining uranium was for nuclear weapon testing during this era of the Second World War. And these nuclear weapon tests were being done on and around the Hopi and Navajo reservations. They were being done all over the West United States, the Northwest, the Midwest, but more specifically in the Southwest. So from 1946 to 1968, 13 million tons of uranium were mined off the reservations of the Hopi and the Navajo. Since 1954, 814 nuclear tests have been performed on their lands, and the largest uranium mine on their land operated from 1979 to 1990, which, if you pay mind, that is far after World War II, but it's still persistent, just for the purpose of nuclear weaponry development. And so in the 1970s, this left over 1,000 open, after the 1970s, and result over 1,000 open pits, untreated pits, were abandoned, exposing radon radiation, which in turn became radioactive and highly toxic sites. This caused over 600 homes to be overexposed, and they had become contaminated with radiation and were too dangerous to inhabit. Therefore, many families were forced to be displaced and find housing elsewhere on the reservations. So in the 1970s, many of the Hopi and the Navajo men went to go work for these uranium mining companies. However, entering the field, they were not provided with the education or preventative tools and techniques for taking cautionary approaches in mining these deathly chemicals and the exposure of radon. And in result, a specific example, in the 1970s, there was a specific uranium site that 150 men were working on. And I suppose the toxicity levels were particularly high in that concentrated area. And of the 150 men, 133 of them have died of lung cancer and other forms of fibrosis. And that was just from that one site. 133 out of 150, that's a pretty significant percentage. And other health risks include bone cancer, impaired kidney function due to the radionuclides in their drinking water. Some ongoing effects include soil pollution, water pollution, air pollution in and around the reservations. The EPA actually felt necessary to put up signs around their clean water sources, warning the natives that their water was toxic and it should not be consumed, which increases the scarcity for their clean water sources that they have to seek elsewhere. And it puts a higher use on the other clean water sources. So their clean water sources have depleted. Another ongoing effect of uranium mining sites and the men that were working on these sites was bringing those chemicals home with them, bringing that pollution home with them on their clothes, because like I said, they're not provided with the preventative gear and tools to take caution against these chemicals. And so they would work in their clothes and in their shoes, and they would bring these chemicals home with them on their clothes and their shoes and in their hair, exposing it to their families, their wives, and their children. Now they're facing generations of cancer in forms other than primarily lung and bone cancer. So in a study done in 2010 over the cancer percentage of the Hopi and the Navajo reservations in comparison to the total Arizona state cancer rates, they did a quantitative research over how many of the natives had been diagnosed with cancer and in what forms. And so the leading cancers for women were breast and uterine. The leading cancers for men were prostate, colon, rectal, and kidney cancers. And in this article that I pulled the statistics from was conducted quantitatively, which means since there wasn't a qualitative upstream approach in finding the causes of said cancers, they only had numbers. But due to my research and reading other articles of how pollution has persisted years beyond the uranium mining since then, I find it safe to draw some connections between the higher rates and other forms of cancer that are present and the pollutions that have been carried over for decades. And when you think about soil pollution, water pollution, this is something that the natives are consuming and generations of consuming. And so it makes sense that other forms of cancer are now becoming present among the native population in the northeastern Arizona.